sales is the most lucrative skill in the world, period. The problem is most sales advice out there today is outdated, cheesy, and can even keep you from getting the deals that can make all the difference in your career. This is the No BS Sales School, a podcast for entrepreneurs and salespeople who want to master the skill of selling without all the BS. Welcome to the No BS Sales School podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. No BS Sales Team, I am excited to bring on a dear friend of mine. Her name is Lindsey McMillian-Steeman. And Lindsey helps people, especially financial advisors, those in the financial service industry, build their business using LinkedIn. That is her tool. Her nickname online is LinkedIn Lindsey, and she's deserved every bit of that. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Walker. I'm so excited to be here. Always a fun time.
Good. Lindsey and I have known each other for a long, long time. And the first time we met, you remember this, Lindsey? The boss you were working for had hired me to help the sales team. You and I had never met. You, I think, were frustrated with the boss. And all of a sudden, you felt like, who the hell was this guy you're meeting with? We met at a coffee shop in Greenville somewhere. And I just remember the bad energy you were sending off, how pissed off you were that you had to meet with me. And even at the end of that meeting, you were still visibly pissed off that you had to meet with me. And I guess, obviously, at some point, we got over ourselves and got to be friends, but it was pretty funny and hostile there at the very beginning. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember it vividly. In fact, after since that time, and you've done such an amazing job mentoring me and training me on how to be a better salesperson, what we did not establish, and I'm going to blame this on you, was an upfront contract and setting expectations. I had no idea what I was doing there. I thought I was about to lose my job if I didn't pass your test. So we were just coming in at two different perspectives. But yeah, it probably took a little while to warm up to you after that, I can imagine.
But it's funny, though. You and I have been, we have worked together, but we've also been friends and shared a bunch of stuff together. And that's cool. It's one of the things I appreciate you, one of my dear friends. Lindsey, one of the things I want to talk today, and one of the reasons I want the No BS Sales Team to listen is, as a LinkedIn expert, I mean, almost everybody in business is on LinkedIn. I think, the ones that I run across anyway, but many of them aren't using it effectively. And what I wanted to talk to you about today was, what are one or two or three things that people just aren't doing that could help them tremendously if they did it on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I experience all the time is, especially since the pandemic and people going online more often, is this idea that LinkedIn is this magical purple unicorn, right?
Yeah.
That, or this fairy godmother, or the magic wand, or the silver bullet, whatever you want to call it, that can immediately yield results, and that it will solve all your problems, or it's that this red, alluring, easy button that if you show up, everything will turn into gold and you'll be a multimillionaire. And it's not that those things aren't possible, but what I like to say is that what we have to remember is, I have to venture to say that the majority of us are in the human-to-human business.
Absolutely.
We talk about, right, B2C, B2B, but at the end of the day, everyone who's seeing your message, receiving your outreach, looking at your profile, they're all human beings with their own story, their own background, their own experiences, their own opinions, their own habits, their own lives. And so it's just keeping in mind that LinkedIn is just a tool. It is an entry point for conversation. I would have to say that anyone who I've worked with in the last almost 10 years doing what I've been doing, the goal is to get offline, to schedule the Zoom meeting or the phone call or the in-person meeting. And so I think I've seen more and more often people forgetting that. They get frustrated with LinkedIn more easily. Oh, LinkedIn's just not working for me. Oh, I'm not getting responses. And I ask, well, Walker, how many times have you reached out? And then you stop and you think about it and you say, oh, well, twice.
Yeah.
Like when has two outreaches ever always consistently yielded an opportunity? Right? Never consistently and often.
Oh, so you mean we still have to work? You mean we still have to, this is still sales. This is still business and business development. What a damn shame. It's a little bit, I talk to companies a fair amount and they will say, oh yeah, we fixed our sales problem. We got Salesforce. Well, that's great. You just spent however much money, big money you spent to get Salesforce. And quite frankly, that doesn't change anything. It's maybe a better management tool, but you're not helping your people get any better by doing that. Maybe you're redirecting their time to something that's not as productive.
Yeah, so true. I mean, I hear that with subscribing to any of the LinkedIn premium options, right? Oh, well, our whole team's on Sales Navigator. I say, great. How's that working out for you?
How are they using it?
Yeah. How are you using it? Using it, and how do you even look on LinkedIn, right? Like, I could teach my clients every button to click. I can help make them close to wizards, right? But if they don't look reasonably intelligent, nobody's going to respond to them, right? If they haven't invested in the way they look on the platform. So it's not just this linear approach, shotgun approach. It's really multifaceted to yield the right opportunities, I would say.
So how did you first find out about LinkedIn? I mean, because LinkedIn had been a thing for a while, and all of a sudden you kind of got into it. What was your exposure, and what was the thing that made you go, wow, I want to do this?
Yeah, so I always think about how my sales career got started, and it makes me laugh thinking that my actual first experience selling was boiled hot dogs at the end of my sidewalk as a little girl. Yeah, lemonade and boiled hot dogs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then in college, I actually volunteered. Well, no, it was a paid position at Clemson to participate in their phone-a-thon, right? Their fundraising efforts. And essentially I was selling to donors. And I called on our call list. We didn't have the luxury of LinkedIn at the time. The goal was to get through as many names on that call sheet as possible. And you had your script and you just went for it. And my training probably consisted of about 4 minutes walking from the front door to where I was seated with the phone. And that very first evening at the phone-a-thon, I called the daughter of a sadly deceased individual who I was calling. I was calling to speak to her father, who happened to be one of the most famous Clemson football players in the school's history. And we didn't have an updated record that he had passed away. Ouch. And so it was so embarrassing and very nearly derailed my future sales career, because I did end up quitting that night. I never went back to the phone-a-thon. I thought I was done. And then, ended up becoming a graphic designer in my 2 internships. And it was really a great but frustrating experience, because I realized, well, gosh, I create something what I think is really cool and beautiful and awesome and should go to production, but I don't have a voice. And so that's when I realized, okay, well, if I'm not going to design it, I'm going to sell it. And so I sold software as a service, sold ink on paper. And then in my career up in the DC metro area, LinkedIn came into the business world. And I've always loved connecting with people and having conversations. And so this tool that allowed me to meet more people in a more efficient and effective way when it would cost $30 to park in DC, and I could only go to so many high-rise buildings in one day and knock on so many doors. LinkedIn provided this entry point to really expand that reach and build a bigger pipeline to start those conversations. So I was really attracted to it out of the gate. And then, here we are today. I've been selling and helping clients and business owners and sales teams and recruiting teams leverage it to not just increase their confidence on how to use it, but truly increase their revenue, which has been, as a salesperson,
that's big.
Super big, right? Like being able to say I've helped my clients generate millions of dollars through what I've taught them. It doesn't get much better than that.
So, because you go from being a user to all of a sudden being an expert. Was that training that got you there? Was that, or was that just your interest? How did you do that?
Yeah, I always say that I go before my clients. So I don't teach anything that I haven't done myself. It's really committing to the tool. And I'll be totally honest with you and your audience, Walker. Before meeting you and getting trained up that the phone is our friend and our ally, and we get paid for the information we gather, not the information we give, right? All the great things that you're teaching your listeners. I probably use LinkedIn as a crutch. I probably used it as a way to hide behind my computer screen, to hide behind my phone. But what that allowed me to do was really sink into the platform and click every button that didn't look clickable and find out efficiencies and ways to be productive in the tool so that it isn't a time waster, so that ultimately, like I said earlier, I can get more times at bat with those phone calls and opportunities.
So you believe, and I believe this too, LinkedIn every time we sell, we're selling human to human, right? And so, or ideally, the bots haven't taken over selling yet. But if we are selling human to human, what are some of the things to be more human on LinkedIn? What are the ways we could use LinkedIn to be more human that maybe people are missing out right now?
Yeah, the thing that I see the biggest opportunity, and it's really, when I share this, people might put their palm to their forehead because it's really not rocket science, and that's just following up.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we're prospecting or trying to get a meeting scheduled with somebody, it takes multiple touches, right? Walker, do you know what the average is at this point?
I think it's probably 10 to 12,
10,
right?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, 10 to 12.
10 to 12 touches to get to have a conversation with 50% of the prospects you're trying to reach, something like that's what I've been taught.
Makes perfect sense. Well, the idea that one outreach on LinkedIn, let's call that the invitation you send out. And let's say if you're really on top of it, when someone accepts that invitation, you follow up. Well, at this point, that's 2 outreaches. And then if you don't get a response after that, our human nature says, and our ego says to ourselves, well, gosh, they just don't want to meet with me, or gosh, they just don't want to have a conversation with me. But you've only reached out to them twice.
And the second time people reach out, at least my experience has been, and this to me is shitty, to put a technical term on it, is they'll accept or they'll ask me to link with them. And then the next email, which may become as an automatic bot, is, here's what I do. Do you want my help? Let's set a meeting.
The worst.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's the worst. And so that the word you used earlier, authenticity, it's just being a human. I mean, I'm not, I don't want to go down the whole path of talking about automation and all of that. But I do think when automation is used well, it can be an additive and a helpful tool. But I see so many people using it the wrong way and abusing it and assuming that it is the only way to get those appointments on the calendar. Because again, like I said earlier, who's receiving your outbound messages? A human being. Mm-hmm. So I had a client, a quick story, probably about 2 years ago at this point. He had used an automation service that was 100% all of his outbound on LinkedIn, and he was only using LinkedIn. So this is the other piece of the human component, is we have to use LinkedIn and all the other communication channels. So in this case, my client at one point had only used automation in LinkedIn, and he said it was a disaster. So, well, what do you mean it was a disaster? He said, nobody responded. I didn't get the results I was hoping for. And so we took a more thoughtful approach, and he started reaching out to people as himself and was being really targeted and really selective. He ended up getting multiple meetings scheduled, multiple new clients, but one story in particular stood out to me that he shared with me. He said, Lindsey, I got on the phone with this guy who I'd been pursuing for months. I mean, probably at least 6 to 8 months at this point. I'm on the phone with him, and I asked him, I said, what made you take the call with me this time? I've been trying to reach you for a long time, it seems. And I'm just curious, right? What changed? And this guy could have said, as you know, any number of things. And what he said was, because you finally sounded like a human when you reached out to me, and you finally sounded like you genuinely were interested in me.
Wow.
Right? And so is it worth taking a breath, taking a beat, taking maybe a more thoughtful and methodical approach instead of throwing a bunch at the wall and seeing what sticks, to yield a potential client or multiple clients that ultimately generate thousands or millions of dollars for you? I would say yes. And I'm not that good at math, right?
But imagine though, and how lucky was that guy? What a valuable lesson to your client before he hired you, I think. How valuable that was for somebody to actually take the time and go, because you sounded like a human being. Because and listen, we on the receiving end, we can tell when it's a bot. We know when it's not sincere. And the reason that so we go back to that person if we do it all with an insincere response back. You give what you get.
Absolutely. And the other piece to that too is at this point in our technology world, the automation really can only do so much. So at this point, what it can't do, what it's not doing is, for example, Walker, if you're on my target prospective client list, somebody who I'm interested in meeting with, and I'm using automation, or I'm just using my authentic self and I'm reaching out to you via a message on LinkedIn, or an invitation and multiple messages, and that's it. Let's say I'm even, plan a step above that, a level above that is I'm also emailing you and calling you.
Yep.
Okay, you're still not responding. Because technically I could even use automation for those things if I'm really tech savvy. But what technology isn't doing yet today, and this is where people are standing out and seeing greater success in their responses, is they're also, Walker, I'm going to look at you on LinkedIn, I'm going to see your activity, and I'm going to engage with your activity. I'm going to comment on something that you've posted. I'm going to pull an article that you shared and send it in a direct message. I'm going to mention that in the voicemail that I leave you. So again, I'm able to decipher that and do something with that observation because I'm a human, not because I'm a robot or an automation tool. So that to me is a really key ingredient that a lot of people are missing.
So what you're telling us again is you got to do the work. There is no easy button. And because there are even people that try and create the automation to fake that, which is, I've enjoyed seeing your stuff on LinkedIn. Would you like for me to help you find 50 new prospects a month? And it's bullshit. And you can see this bullshit, and I guess they get business from it because I get shit like that every day. But it really is, it turns me off. I will typically go and unfollow somebody that hits me back with a bot, response, just because I don't want to junk up my network with that shit. It doesn't help me.
Right. Well, and I go back to, again, what I said earlier, what you taught me was you get paid for the information you gather, not the information you give. People want to know that you care about them. They don't care about you yet. They don't know they need to care about you yet. Right. So if you lead with a genuine curiosity about their story, what they do, a quick example, again, I say I go before my clients. I had a post that went out on LinkedIn that got a lot of traction and traffic and engagement. And I took a few minutes and checked out who had reacted to it and who had commented on it. And there were several people who I didn't know. Well, I checked out those several people, right? I did my homework. One gentleman in particular, I reached out to him on LinkedIn. Hey, I said, thanks for, reached out to him via an invitation, said, thanks so much for engaging with my recent post. And I referenced the post so that he would, his memory would be jogged. He accepted my invitation. And we started this kind of ping pong match back and forth in our messages on LinkedIn. Well, he just recently started a new job. I don't know about you, but whether you're launching your own business or starting a new job, whether it's with a new company or you just got promoted, it's overwhelming and you have a lot on your plate. The last thing you can probably do in that first at least 30 to 45, maybe even 60 days is take a call with somebody like me, right?
Right, yeah.
Because, and I get that and I respect that. And so it has happened that I reached out to him in the spring and I said, hey, congrats on the new role. I'm curious, are they providing any type of training for you? Because it looks like you're in a new industry. Again, made an observation on his profile, brought it into the direct message. And he goes, yeah, the company has been awesome. They're providing phenomenal training. I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, but it's been great. Well, to me, as the service provider, that's a great indication that I could potentially be a resource to him and his sales team in the future. And so I said, that's really exciting to hear. Not everybody works for companies that invest in their people. I said, I'd love to connect with you maybe this summer when the dust is settled a little bit to explore how LinkedIn might be an additive to your sales process. Would you be open to that? ? Thanks, Lindsey, phone number, email. He goes, yeah, that sounds awesome. Summer would probably be the best time because I'll have my feet under me by that point. And guess what most people don't do, Walker? Even after all that great lead up, they won't actually reach back out to the guy in the summer. So guess what I've done? I've scheduled a reminder in my calendar, in my CRM, no excuses. My assistant also has a reminder as well. I will follow up with this guy. I will get a call scheduled with him. I can guarantee that.
It's really, it's so simple, but people don't do it because they're lazy or they're looking for the simple fix, or we get bored. I mean, you know this, prospecting is all about building familiarity and context. Familiarity and context. Who is this person? Do I recognize them? And then in what context? And I tell people when they're starting a new job, part of their perhaps imposter syndrome is they still see themselves as doing the old job. And the people that they call on either don't have familiarity and context, or they may say, oh gosh, you used to sell insurance. What do you mean you're selling equipment now? They don't understand the context. So it's over time that we begin to build familiarity and context, which is why it takes 10 to 12 touches. I also think it's great that you actually, you took the time, and this is something that you told me to do, is when people comment on the articles, is to send them a quick email and say, hey, thanks for commenting on it. Appreciate your engaging. Would you like to link or whatever? And so it's just a start. I've never got anybody turn me down for that. What do you, tell me about the algorithm of LinkedIn, because this is something I kind of struggle with. I've gotten different advice from different people, and they say before you post something, spend 15, 20 minutes engaging on LinkedIn, and then 15 or 20 minutes after you post it. And that's the way to get the most engagement. Is there any truth to that?
From what I've experienced, yes. That said, LinkedIn, of all of the platforms, online platforms, is very hush-hush about their algorithms. So I personally, because I err on the side of intentionality and human-to-human relationships, and perhaps whether it's a right or wrong approach, it's just the one I take with my business and my clients. I really don't spend a whole heck of a lot of time trying to uncover the boulder that I'm probably never going to be able to lift, no matter what type of equipment I use to pick it up. So I'll pay attention here or there, Walker, regarding LinkedIn's algorithm. You're right. It's part of my job to stay up to speed on what LinkedIn is doing to enhance the experience for their members. But for the most part, I'm kind of maybe a traditionalist in my approach and how I use the tool.
So I guess the point you just made is it's not one of these set it and forget it. I can just post things every now and then and just leave them alone and never engage with people and expect the tool to work with me. I mean, same, right? If you're posting content. So tell me about content. What kind of content do you suggest people post or add?
Yeah, that question has come up. Every week I am talking about content. I just had a training session with a client yesterday, a business owner, actually is a serial entrepreneur launching a new company here this spring. And he asked me about content. And so to keep it very simple, right? Part of it is asking the person, well, what does content mean to you? How often do you post? And then based on the information you would share with me, Walker, I would say any number of things. In this case, this gentleman is not very active on LinkedIn yet, but he has the desire to be present. And so I said, you know what, we're going to keep it really basic. I want you to think of the content you put on LinkedIn in two buckets. One bucket is your knowledge and expertise. And that can come in a variety of formats. It can come in the format of an article that you write. It could come in the format of a video that you share, a picture of you at a conference, right? Speaking at that conference, maybe with somebody else and looping them into the conversation. You might want to call it self-promotional, but I like to think of it as more cultural and educational, right? So this is the content that I'm creating and I'm posting. And then the second bucket to also consider and keep in mind to incorporate are what I call third-party content. So that comes in a few formats. One is 99% of the folks and successful established professionals that our team works with are reading articles online. Yep. Forbes, Inc., Wall Street Journal, you name it. They're learning how to be better leaders, time management, productivity, you name it. So any of those articles that you're reading, if that content could be valuable to your network, and it might not have anything, it likely doesn't have anything to do with your specific niche and expertise, consider sharing that with your network on LinkedIn. So that when they think, in my world, about LinkedIn or sales training or recruiting or their next conference and hiring a speaker, hopefully they'll think of me because I've been incorporating that other content or what I say is third-party content. The other layer to that, Walker, of third-party content is resharing other people's content.
Yep.
Walker, you and I have a little, and I know you do this with a few other folks as well. It takes a lot of effort to create content, to post it, to schedule it,
Yep.
Just to get it out there, period, to write the comment, to think of who to loop in, to consider what hashtags. So it's okay. I'm not opposed, like you and I do, and a few other folks, and probably many others as well. Leverage your network, your allies, to help promote that content. So every now and then, Walker, I'll ping you of an article I'd really like to get more reach and more eyeballs on. Say, hey, Walker, would you be open to sharing this with your network? I'm not assuming that you're always going to say yes, but in the cases that you do, you'll reshare that content. Well, that's an example, Walker, of you sharing quote unquote third-party content. So it's not just the Walker McKay show, right? And you're only focusing on that first bucket. You're also incorporating other people's content.
Well, I feel like this goes back to your point of being human. None of us are single dimensional, right? So if all I talk about ever is sales training, sales mindset, that kind of stuff, I mean, believe it or not, I'm more complicated than that, right? There's more to me, right? That somebody else may latch onto. Somebody else may not, at the moment, they may not care about my sales training content. What they may notice is, wow, this is an article about leadership, and they notice me. Right. And then maybe they notice this, and maybe there's a way in time that this comes up again. And I read this book, and this is a very simple thing, but this guy talked about green bananas versus yellow bananas. He was just talking about prospects, and he's basically playing the long game. There are some bananas that are green that are not ready to pick. They're not ready, but they're worth keeping an eye on and staying around until they do turn yellow. And then there are yellow bananas that are ripe right now. And so we've got to do a lot of green banana prospecting, for lack of a better term, because that's where, we're going to need business tomorrow and next month and next year and the year after that as well.
Right. And the other piece too, and importance to the content is, and being consistent with it, is you can be direct in your outreach in prospecting, like we were talking about earlier, right? Sending invitations, following up in direct messages, calling the person directly, emailing them, finding them on other platforms, and add, right, including posting content and being active in engaging with your network on LinkedIn, because people are looking, right? People aren't always going to say, Walker, the reason I am finally calling you, the reason I'm finally responding is because of the great content you post on LinkedIn. Not everyone is going to tell you that, but I guarantee you, I say this because I've been doing this long enough. I've worked with thousands of people. It is happening. It is happening. I have had countless clients. I just had a debrief call with a meeting with a client yesterday, and he said to me, Lindsey, since our half-day workshop with our national sales meeting last month, and he's the president. So this is also happening with every one of his salespeople. They did an amazing job implementing what they were taught on LinkedIn. He said, Lindsey, in just a few weeks, I've already had 2 potential client opportunities reach out to me. And because I'm curious, like, what prompted the outreach? And he said, you're visible. You and your team are visible. You're showing up. You're putting content out there. It's not just you, it's the rest of your team too. Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Right? Just because they're showing
powerful.
up, right? And people are observing, they are looking, even if they're not telling you every single time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of one of the things I think you taught me too is don't just look at your likes and shares. There are plenty of people, 90% of people just consuming content without touching a button. And that may be the reason they pick you up. Hey, Lindsey, tell me something. I know that people, the NoBS sales team, people are listening like, how in the world do I get her help? How would somebody find you? Other than, and including LinkedIn.
Of course, right? LinkedIn, right? You can probably, maybe at this point, you can search LinkedIn Lindsey, Lindsey, but Lindsey McMillian-Steeman, McMillian Consulting. Honestly, I would say I'm going to do this, and maybe I'm breaking all the podcast rules, Walker, but our emailing Kathy on my team, which would be team@mcmillianconsulting.com, is the best way to get a call scheduled in my calendar. She is the puppet master and gatekeeper of my calendar. So if you want to have a introductory discovery call, tell me what's going on, see if I'm the right person to help you, that's the quickest way. And then I also, if you're okay with it, I've got a little freebie I'd love to share 100%.
With your listeners. Great. Yes.
Awesome. So we just released a new guide. It's an MVP guide. So it's 9 weekly habits to become a LinkedIn MVP. And so to access that guide, you go to linkedintoit.com linkedin.com/MVP. linkedintoit.com/MVP.
That'll be in the show notes. So if you guys, is it just will you spell Intuit? Is it Intuit, like Intuit, the software company, or what?
So it's linked.
Yeah.
IN, right? LinkedIn, TOIT.com.
Got it. And that's in the show notes. So Thank you. Lindsey, this has been a super pleasure. I really appreciate your being a guest on the show. Now, but yes, sales team, if you have not already, subscribe to the podcast, share it with somebody who needs to hear. And a huge favor you could do me, if you haven't already, is to write a review. Write some words on Apple Podcasts of what you get out of this show. Stars are great. I appreciate stars, but words matter. And right now we've got like 78 or 79 reviews. If I get over 100, then all of a sudden it gives me much more visibility in the podcast market. If you will write a review, take a picture of it, send it to me, walker@walkermckay.com. I'll call you, and I've got a special prize for you that I think you'll like having. Lindsey McMillian-Steeman, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for listening to OBS Sales School Podcast. If you haven't already, please take 1 minute to write a quick review for the show. It really does make a huge difference. Also, subscribe to the show and please forward this episode to somebody else who needs to hear it. As a bonus for listening, I'm going to give you access to a free mini course, 7 expensive sales mistakes you're making and what you can do about it. Go to www.7salesmistakes.com and get access to the free mini course. That's the number 7salesmistakes.com. Thanks again for listening to the OBS Sales School Podcast.